right, good afternoon. Welcome to the Ethics and Scholarship event for graduate students. I am Amy Peterson, and I am going to take care of some introductions here before we get started. I teach in the Department of Special Education, and the topic of ethics is especially interesting to myself. I'm a qualitative researcher, and so I enjoy having conversations about what it means to be an ethical researcher. This afternoon, you should have an agenda before you, and I want to speak just a moment as to how we've organized this afternoon, and then we'll go ahead and do some introductions before we get started. This afternoon is organized into two parts that will provide us with an opportunity to explore two issues that are relevant, I'm guessing, to many of your lives. The first part of the afternoon will be taking a look at ownership of intellectual property and creative works. And the second part of the afternoon, we'll be taking a look at student-mentor relationships. When we examine each of these topics, we will be listening to, viewing an improv, a role play that gets us into the topic, if you will. That will be followed by some group discussion. And prior to that role play, we'll be having some presentation of information that will help introduce the topic. What I'd like to do is introduce some of our key people here this afternoon. First, Helen Harton is a professor in psychology. She teaches many graduate courses, including research methods, graduate professional issues, and social psychology. Many of you might best know her as chair of the IRB board. So if you have put together an internal review board application, perhaps it has gone past or across Helen's desk. So welcome, Helen. She will be providing us with the presentation that will introduce each topic this afternoon. The next person I'd like to introduce is Doug Shaw. Doug is professor of mathematics and teaches in the Department of Mathematics. He has also worked with the Center for Enhancement of Teaching here at UNI, as well as the Center for Teaching and Learning Research at the University of Minnesota, and the Center on Learning and Teaching at the University of Michigan. He also directs the improv group Half Mastered here on campus, and I want to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves as well. So if you are part of the improv role play today, would you mind just telling us who you all are?
Hey, I'm Tanner Randall. I do improv here, and I don't go to college anymore. So, you guys did better than me.
Not at all.
My name is Mitch Ellison, and I'm an undergrad student in social work, and I've been in the group for like 2 years. So.
Hi, my name is Josh Kolpitz, and I am also an undergrad student in the Department of Theater.
My name is Danny Fitzgerald. I'm an undergrad in the English department.
Thank you. What I think is so unique about today is we have this opportunity to work across disciplines, and the very nature of this event in terms of its interdisciplinary, I think, provides us with opportunities to have unique conversations with people that we might not otherwise meet or talk to. And so what I'd like to do here is to real briefly go to each of your tables and ask your faculty facilitator to introduce him or herself, and then we'll move on with some nuts and bolts of the afternoon. Can I start here with table number 1?
Yeah, I'm Deborah Deemer, and I'm in the College of Education. Do you want to?
Nope, that would be great.
I'm Lori Miller. I am actually in the Office of Sponsor Programs. Lauren Nelson in the Department of Communication Sciences and Disorders.
I'm Susan Roberts-Dovey from the School of Health, PE, and Leisure Services.
I'm Sarah Scott from the Department of Special Education and College Ed.
I'm Victoria Francisco from Communication Studies.
Don Davis from Health Promotion.
Donna Schumacher Douglas from Department of Curriculum and Instruction.
Chris Mack from Sociology.
All right, and we did notice that table 10 does not have a faculty advisor, so we're hoping that they can join your table there. And the role of your faculty person at your table is after we hear some information in terms of the topic at hand. After we have a chance to watch the role play, then we'll have some small group discussion at your table, and your faculty facilitator will be in charge of facilitating that discussion. After we have that discussion, I am going to ask each of your tables to do some report out around some of the conversations that you've had, some of the high points of those conversations. So do expect that we'll come back as a large group, and I'll ask for some sharing out in between each topic. Now, in terms of the nuts and bolts today, there are refreshments back there, so please help yourself. The bathrooms are under construction, so you may have to go the distance across the food court to find a restroom. We will not be taking an official restroom break, but if you do need a break, please feel free to take that break. Perhaps during the large group discussion would be a good time. Are there any questions or comments before we move forward? All right, then I'm going to give it away to Dr. Harton, who will start our conversation today around respecting ownership of intellectual properties.
Thank you. Am I on the mic okay? We're good? Okay. Like she said, I'm going to be giving a little introduction to the topic and talking about some issues. And as I'm talking about this, sort of my experience and where I'm coming from, I've been graduate coordinator in psychology for several years. I've also chaired over 30 master's theses and about 20 honors theses. I'm the IRB chair, as she mentioned, and I've also been on a lot of graduate college committees related to ethical sorts of issues. I've been at UNI 13 years, and so some of what I'll talk about today involves some examples of things that have happened. Hopefully I will disguise them enough, or the people who are in them won't listen to the video and won't recognize themselves in that. But I do want to say, I'll be talking about a little bit about some horror stories today, but I've dealt with over 200 graduate students. So if you figure if it happened to one person, that's still less than 1%. So these things aren't likely to happen, but I will give some examples of why these sorts of things are important. I also put on the slide, you can't really see it in the color there, but my email address is just my last name at uni.edu, and my office is Baker 357. So if you ever want to stop by and talk about any of these issues, I'm happy to do that. This is something that I feel strongly about, is helping graduate students to adjust, helping to make a better environment for graduate students. So feel free to stop by for any of that. Okay, so starting off with the ownership of intellectual and creative works, one of the first issues is, why should we care about this? Why does it matter whether we cite people? Why is that such a big issue for academics? And one of the primary things is that basically it's stealing. If you take someone's ideas and don't give them credit for it, you're stealing their ideas and claiming them as your own. If you take their words and don't give them credit for it, you're stealing their ideas. And one way to think about this, we were talking about it a little bit before the session started today, is, think about how you would feel if this happened to you. If you worked on a paper and you stayed up all night and you got a really good paper, and then your roommate just took the paper and turned it in for themselves. I mean, obviously that would be something that would be upsetting to you. It's the same sort of thing when we're dealing with information in professional journals. Someone has put the time and effort into that, has worked hard on that material, and so you need to make sure that when you're presenting that material, you do it accurately. It's also lazy to just take other people's ideas. As graduate students, you're scholars in a discipline. You should care about that discipline and want to contribute to it. And one of the ways that you do that is by making original contributions, not just taking those of others. It doesn't make an original contribution. Again, as graduate students, you should be trying to do that. It doesn't show that you understood or processed the information. One of my friends who used to teach at a community college talks about, after she talked to her students about plagiarism, she got a student who turned in a paper, and there was a quotation mark at the very beginning of the paper, and 3 pages later, there was a quotation mark at the end of the paper. And when she got it back failing it, she's like, well, I cited things like you're supposed to. I don't know what the problem is. It's like, all you're doing is showing that you can type. You're not showing that you actually understood the information. So by putting it in your own words, you're showing that you processed and understood this information and are adding something new in the way that you're presenting it. Some of the things that we'll talk about today can also be misleading to the reader. So not only in terms of whose idea it is, but it can also make the literature seem stronger or weaker than it is. So if you only report literature that's consistent with your hypothesis, you're giving people an erroneous impression. Or if you take a study that you've done and cut it up into 3 studies and make it look like 3 separate studies and publish it, it makes it look like there's a lot more evidence than there actually is. So there are a lot of ethical issues that we'll talk about today other than plagiarism that can be misleading in those sorts of ways. And then finally, it may even be illegal. So there are issues of copyright infringement, and I'm not going to get into copyright law here except to say that you should be aware of it. But there may be instances where that comes into effect as well. So what is plagiarism? I've got the definition from UNI, properly cited here, that plagiarism is defined as the process of stealing or passing off as one's own the ideas or words of another, or presenting as one's own an idea or product which is derived from an existing source. They also have definitions on here of cheating, which is also obviously something that you shouldn't be doing. I'm not going to get into that today, but that's something else that there's sometimes a problem with. And, you know, I'm sure that as undergraduates, you all heard about plagiarism, and maybe you're like, oh yeah, plagiarism, I know what that is. But from having taught lots and lots of graduate students, I realize that there are things that people still aren't clear on. And in one case, there's something that I even realized that I did in graduate school that I shouldn't have done. And so what I want to present to you today are some things that maybe you haven't thought about or haven't thought as much about, and some things that might be problems that you might not realize are problems. And why should you care other than that you're stealing and being unethical and all that? There's consequences. In graduate school, at a minimum, if you plagiarize on a paper, you would probably fail the paper. You might be asked to leave your program or university. We have had, in the psychology department, I'll speak to that since I'm in it, we've had at least one case of a student who was asked to leave for plagiarism, and I believe about 3 students were asked to leave for cheating. It can also end up on your permanent record, and other graduate schools aren't going to want to take you if you've got a big P on your transcript, like your scarlet letter there. So you want to make sure that you're aware of this so that you don't do it for those reasons. There can also be legal consequences if we're talking about copyright infringement. And there are cases where people have had their degrees rescinded because of plagiarism. There are places or situations where people have had their careers ruined, politicians or historians or academics, because they were found to have plagiarized earlier. And so it's really important to be aware of, because one of the problems with it is that people aren't always doing it on purpose, but you can't tell whether they're doing it on purpose or not. So, you know, if I look in your purse and I find my credit card, you know, maybe it just fell in there, but we're not going to be able to prove that it just fell in there. We're going to assume that you took it. And so you can't really prove intention. And so puts really an onus on you to make sure that you not do it. Not only to not do it intentionally, but to ensure that you're not doing it accidentally as well. What sort of products do these things apply to? Obviously, they're going to apply to manuscripts that are submitted for publication. Everybody's pretty clear on that. You shouldn't plagiarize on things that you're submitting to be published. But it also applies to theses, dissertations, research papers, and it applies as well to conference presentations. That's another public outlet of your work. To papers in class, to thesis, dissertation, and research proposals, take-home tests, any assignment. And one of the things that I want to do with this slide is to make it clear how broad this is. So people sometimes get, well, I shouldn't plagiarize on papers. But then it's, well, that was just an assignment. It didn't matter. No, it still matters. You still can't copy things for assignments or for a take-home test. Maybe I shouldn't say this one publicly, but this is the one that as a graduate student I didn't realize. I think there were things that I didn't cite in a take-home test once because I wasn't thinking about that as plagiarism. But you really want to be aware that it's not just papers, but it's any product that you're turning in or anything that you're writing and presenting publicly these issues apply to. And you want to make sure that you properly attribute other people's ideas and their words. Plagiarism of text is the first kind of plagiarism, and this is where you're taking other people's words directly. So whenever you're doing that, you always want to use quotation marks and put the page numbers for anything that's a direct quote. And again, it doesn't matter what kind of text it is. I have had people in class who have plagiarized hypotheses, and they're like, well, they're their hypotheses. How can I say them any other way? It's like, no, you can still paraphrase people's hypotheses. You can still talk about what their idea is without using their exact words. And if you feel like you absolutely can't, then you have to put quotation marks on it and put a page number. So no matter what type of text it is, even for mundane text, even for descriptions of the method or for descriptions of the hypotheses, if you use their exact words, you have to use quotation marks and give them credit for that. And it doesn't have to be a full sentence. It can be a phrase, sometimes even one word. If there's a really specific word that an author uses that really captures that concept, even that one word might need to be cited and quoted. So I'm working on a book review right now where they talk about contagion of pain. And this is kind of a relatively unique way to talk about aggression. And so in the review, I've got quotation marks around contagion of pain. Even though it's only 3 words, I need to cite that because it's not a common way of putting things. So when you bring this up, sometimes one of the ways that people respond to this is they say, okay, so I can't take more than, let's say, 3 words in a row. So I'll take the sentence, and every 3rd word I'll look up and replace. That's still a problem. So you don't just thesaurus in new words, take a sentence and cut out every 3rd word, or switch the order, put the beginning of the sentence at the end of the sentence at the beginning. That's still plagiarism. You're still taking someone else's words. And the ironic thing about this is that when you do these sorts of things, you usually spend more time looking up words to replace it than you would to just think of a new way to say it. So whenever you're reading information, try not to quote. Try to think about, what does this mean and how can I express this? How do you want to get across in an original way what they're talking about? So you can't use their sentence structures either, or just move words around or just replace a few words. Second kind of plagiarism is plagiarism of ideas. So this is when you're taking other people's ideas, either in your literature review or maybe as the idea for your paper or project. And you want to always give credit to other people's ideas. This is one that I find that graduate students are usually more familiar with. So when you're talking about previous research or you're talking about other people's ideas, make sure that you cite those. But you also want to cite it even if it's their idea for a study. So let's say you've got your literature review and you've cited all the previous research, but you're doing a study or you're testing an idea that someone else came up with. And I think sometimes people are scared, well, if I say it was someone else's idea, then people are not going to think that I'm as good a student. And that's not true. What you want to do, it's fine to test other people's ideas in situations. So, they mention at the end of their paper, another good idea to test would be this. You can test that idea, but you need to give them credit for it. This may be things that you want to credit either directly from a written source, perhaps from a personal communication. Say you're at a talk and someone talks about other things that they might do or other ideas for research that might be looked at in the area. In that case, you could cite it as a conference talk, or you could cite it as a personal communication if it comes up in conversation. But if you're working on an idea that you know where you got it from, you should cite where you got it from. It gets to be difficult because sometimes, we'll think, oh, I came up with this idea when it really came out of someone else. And so you want to try to be careful to think about, where did this idea really come from? Did I hear about it from somewhere else, or did I read this, or is it an original thought that I came up with? Another issue that we'll talk about a little bit more later is if you're collaborating with other people, whether they're other professors, other graduate students, you want to make sure that you have clear rules about who's going to be an author, who's going to own the data or own the ideas or whatever early on in the process, rather than waiting until it's completed and there being problems and hard feelings. And, it may change over time, but you do want to make sure that you address those things. Okay, the third kind of plagiarism I'm going to talk about is self-plagiarism. And this one is another one that as a graduate student I wasn't as aware of, that we were like, oh, you can plagiarize yourself. What are you going to get mad at yourself? But self-plagiarism is still a problem. Some examples of it could be republishing a paper or just adding a little bit of data to a paper and publishing it again. So one example of this, and again, this would be something that makes it look like there are more studies than they actually are. So I might do a study with 50 participants, get certain results and publish it. Then I collect some more data and I put it all together and act like it's a new study. That's plagiarism because I'm taking stuff that's already been published and misrepresenting it. Another problem is kind of the opposite of that. You've got one data set or one idea or one project, and instead of publishing it together in a way that would make the most conceptual sense, To get more publications, you cut it down into little tiny parts. And that can be a problem as well, because again, it makes it look like there's more research than there is on the topic. There might be times when it's appropriate to publish things separately, but it needs to be because they're conceptually separate, not because you're just trying to do it to get more publications. Reusing your old text. And I have seen cases of this in published works. I have a friend who is a well-known social psychologist who will take, I'll read a paragraph and it's like, wow, I think I've read that paragraph before. But that's something as well that you shouldn't be doing. Again, it's lazy. It's not showing new processing. It's not showing new contributions. It's just being lazy and presenting things again. And then an issue that you might come up with as a graduate student is double dipping. It can also be a problem if you turn in parts of the same paper for more than one assignment. And again, there might be times when this is okay. So for example, I teach research methods for graduate students, and in that class, students can use and are expected to use their thesis proposal as the paper for that class. So they're really sort of getting double credit in that it's their thesis proposal and the paper for the class. But that's clear, and I make it clear that it's okay. It's on you to make it clear with everyone involved that it's okay if you're going to do something like that. So if you are taking a graduate class and you want to write a paper that's related to your thesis, you need to talk to the instructor and say, is this okay that I'm doing this? How do I need to make it different so that this is an original assignment? Otherwise, you're just passing off the same work more than once and getting double credit for it. So make sure on anything like that that you ask and are clear in terms of what the issues are. Okay, so how can you avoid plagiarism? You don't want to have the big P on you. It can follow you around, cause lots of problems. What are some ways you can avoid it? And I'm going to give a couple strategies here. There's also some resources on the handout that you got, and I'll be posting some other ones as well when we get the PowerPoints and the video up. Like I mentioned before, first issue is that the intention doesn't matter. You can't prove that it was accidental. We can't prove that it was purposeful. It's there and it's done, and so that's what the assumption is. And so you have to work to avoid it rather than just not trying to do it. One thing, and I actually just read a paper that did this, you don't want to just go crazy though and have a string of quotes. So it's like, oh, well, I'm not going to plagiarize, so every third sentence is going to be a quote. That's not working either. Okay, your graduate students now, you should be able to take information and process it and pull it together in your own words. Otherwise, you're not showing that you understand the work. So you shouldn't just have a string of quotes. And generally, depending on the type of paper you're doing, you probably should have very few quotes in your paper. Maybe if you're doing an analysis of literature, you might have more quotes as examples, or you're doing a qualitative study, you have quotes from your participants. But in general, in terms of the previous literature, you should be putting that in your own words and not using quotations. Unless it's something that's just said so absolutely beautiful, there is no way that you could make it better, and that's unlikely, right? Some strategies that you can use, one is to read and then wait before you write. So instead of reading it and then writing at the same exact time, because there you're likely to even unintentionally use the same words. If you read it, then go take a break, do some other things, and then come back and kind of put those ideas together and put the ideas down afterward. That can help you avoid plagiarism sometimes. You can also make sure that you've understood what you read. So it's really difficult to paraphrase something if you don't understand it. And in preparing for this, there were some examples that I read from chemistry with, all these letters and enzymes and all these things. I have no idea what it's saying, and so I could not paraphrase that accurately. You need to make sure that you understand the stuff that you're reading and using in your research so that you can accurately paraphrase it. And if you don't understand it, ask somebody, because that's part of your role as graduate students, is to learn and understand this information. Another thing that you can do that I personally do and find helpful is to make notes on the article or in a file. So when I read an article, I will kind of on the front of the article, if I printed it out, put a few words that tell me the main points, kind of little bullet points on the article. So when I go back, I don't have to read the original text, I don't have to look back at their words, I've just got my phrases for what this article is about. So as an example, I might put something like more important, more extreme. Okay, and that's going to tell me what the article's getting at, what their main finding is, and putting it in a phrase form like that makes it less likely that I'll accidentally use the author's language. Then as I go through to fill in my article more fully, I'll start with my Word file where I kind of have an outline of my article, and I can take these little blurbs from each individual article and put them together and start kind of filling in notes on paragraphs, then go back and fill in the words on them. So, for example, this is from one of my papers. So more important attitudes are more extreme. That's kind of the topic of my paragraph. And then I have 3 findings that I want to get in there. So one was they found this with college students and elementary school students on school proposals. They also found this when judging others. People believe that other people will do this too. So I can take these general notes and then form a new paragraph from it where I'm not doing that directly while I'm looking at the work. And it makes it a little more likely that I won't accidentally take someone else's words. Okay, I'm going to also mention some other unethical writing practices. So plagiarism is one problem, but it's not the only thing that you need to worry about in terms of ownership of ideas. Some other problems include citing something that you haven't read or that you've only read the abstract of. And this is something else that I think people sometimes don't realize. When you as a scholar are citing another source, that implies that you have read and understood that source. So you shouldn't be citing something when you've only read the abstract, unless you cite it that way, and you have in your reference section that you only looked at the abstract. And the reason that this is important is because you don't know that the article actually says what someone else said it did. We had an example in my social psych class the other day where 2 different sources were talking about another article that I've read, and in both cases, they talked about the findings incorrectly. And so they obviously needed to do a little more looking back at the original article. But if you just took their word for it, you would be citing that article incorrectly as well. So you should only cite things that you've read and understood. Another issue is citing secondary sources. As graduate students, you should, wherever possible, be citing primary sources. So you shouldn't be citing textbooks or review articles unless you're talking about the conclusions of the article. You should be looking at the primary source of who originally did this study. Where originally did these data come from? And if you do have to cite a secondary source, you should make that clear. If somebody talks about a project in a paper and you've tried to get that and it's just not possible to get, you can cite it, and your discipline probably has different ways. The APA, you do so-and-so, cite it in the article that you actually read. But you want to make sure that that's clear, that you didn't read the article, that you're relying on this other person's interpretation. Because then, if that other person is wrong, you're protected. Okay? So anything that you have in your reference section, you're claiming that you know those things. And so if you can't get it, you want to make clear that you're using a secondary source. Another problem is selective reporting of the literature. So if you have an idea, you don't want to only cite evidence in favor of your idea if there actually is evidence on both sides. So you want to be honest in your reporting of the literature. Be honest about what's been found. You can counter it. You can say, well, 2 studies found this, but there were some problems with these. You can talk about that. You can try to discount it, but you need to be honest that they exist. And don't only cite things that support your own ideas. Another problem is selectively reporting method or results. So some examples here might be leaving out part of the method, or leaving out, you had a research assistant working with you and they messed up, and so you're just pretending like that didn't happen. Those are problems as well. You want to be honest about your method, honest about what happened. When you're analyzing your data, whether you're doing qualitative or quantitative stuff, you want to do it in an honest, ethical way. There are problems when people will take, say with quantitative data, and just analyze it 10 or 15 times, and then finally one way that you analyze it, it actually comes out and you report that. That's unethical, that's a problem. Okay? You want to be honest in terms of your reporting of what you did, your reporting of what you found. And if there are multiple ways to analyze it, you might mention both of them, but you don't want to just do it a whole bunch of ways and then find the one way that works. Okay. Submitting things without co-author approval can also be an issue. So if you're working with someone else, whether it's a faculty member or another student, and you're going to submit this to a conference or you're going to submit this to a journal, you want to make sure that they're okay with you submitting that. You don't want to just send things in and put people's names on it without them being aware of it. On the other side, you don't want to send it in and leave their name off if it should be on there. So you want to make sure that you're upfront and talk with your co-authors about these sorts of things. Okay, another issue that I'm going to briefly touch on is who owns the data or product. And this could be a case if you're collecting data in some way. Again, whether it's qualitative or quantitative data, there might be at least three possibilities. It might be that your professor owns the data, it might be that you own the data, or it might be that some other agency owns the data. So for example, for the agency, if you're doing a project for your internship and they ask you to look at some satisfaction surveys, those are their data, and you can only publish that if they're okay with that, or present that if they're okay with that. In other cases, it might be that you're working with a professor and they give you some data to work with. Same thing, you can't just take that data unless they say that it's okay. And you want to make sure that ownership is clear throughout the process. So if you're working as an intern on something, ask them up front, is this something that I could potentially use? Or if you're working with a professor on something, ask, is this something that I could use for my thesis or for this other thing? Because you don't want there to be problems with this coming up later. And one of the horror stories that I have, and the faculty members that are involved in this are no longer here, but we had a student a few years ago who had her thesis defense, and she had a lot of changes to make before she graduated, or before she was able to turn it in and get her signatures. And after the defense, she had a falling out with the professor, and the professor said, you can't use these data anymore. So she had already defended her thesis, and now was told that they couldn't use the data. And it was actually related to some potential harassment issues. It was it was an ugly case all the way around. But she, she came and talked to me, I went and talked to the department head, and we talked to the faculty member, and the faculty member said, well, it's not my data, it's the agency's data. And so it's not up to me, it's up to the agency. Okay, so we contact the agency, but he was very high in this agency, and so basically, when he said, I don't really want her to use these data, the other people there, they don't want to upset him because he's giving them all this work, he's a big dog there, so they went along with that. And so the agency was like, oh, you can't use the data either. We worked out a compromise in her case so that she could graduate and so that she didn't have to start over. But because of that case, we actually put in our departmental guidelines that if a student has defended their thesis, those data are theirs, and no matter what happens afterwards, they can use those for their thesis. There might be other issues, though, if it's earlier in the process. If you're working with a professor on a project and you're a month or two in and then you decide you want to work with someone else, that person may not want you to take those data somewhere else. And so you want to be clear about those sorts of things as early in the process as possible so that you don't run into these situations coming up later. Okay, another issue that there's not a super clear answer on, but is going to be somewhat it depends, is who should be an author. So you've done your thesis, obviously on your thesis you're the author, but when you want to go publish that, who should be the authors on that? And there are guidelines specific to disciplines. These are some of the ones from the American Psychological Association, which also other groups go along with. And generally their guidelines suggest that if you make a substantial contribution, you should be included as an author. And they give some examples of substantial contributions. Might be coming up with the hypothesis or the thesis, designing the study, interpreting the results, doing the analyses, writing the paper. These are some things that might be substantial. Some things that might not be so substantial might be just entering the data, or just recruiting participants, or maybe making a suggestion about analyses. But it's going to depend. There might be cases where someone does a lot of the no things and enough that they do warrant authorship. So again, you want to be clear when you're working with other people early in the process about what the expectations should be, and perhaps even get that in writing. You don't have to go like with a formal. One of the things I read suggested you get a memorandum of understanding and have everybody sign it. That might be a little extreme. But if you send them an email and you say, this is my understanding, you've got a print copy of what the agreement was. Okay, so email can be a casual way to get written documents, kind of laying out what the understanding is between those. And authors should generally be listed in order of contribution. So the first author is the one who puts the most in, second author, and so on. And generally for these people that might not warrant authorship, you might want to at least give them a footnote and say that they've helped in some ways. Okay, so when you have doubts or questions about issues like this, make sure that you ask, first of all. There's the saying about, oh, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. But when you're talking about academic things, it's not. If you do something that's wrong or unethical, it can have huge effects on your career in school and your career after that. So you want to make sure that you're clear beforehand. So make sure that you ask someone, is this okay or whatever. Look at the guidelines in your discipline. You all have different disciplines that have printed things in terms of what's okay, who should be authors, how should things be cited. And then as I mentioned, there'll also be some resources posted with these PowerPoints that you can look at as well. And I will be around today for a while too if there are questions. So I think now we're going to think about some of these issues and think about kind of maybe a grayer area, something not so black and white as copying text, and how people might want to deal with that. So I'll invite Half-Masted to come up and do a role play of some of these issues.
So what you're about to see is a dramatization from Half-Masted, you and I's comedy improv troupe performing at the Lamppost next month. And one thing just keep in mind is this was designed, there is not a clear-cut answer to the questions posed. Okay, so this is not meant to be a very didactic, bad person, good person sort of thing. Okay, you guys ready? Yep. Okay, take it away.
Hey, Mitch.
Oh, hey, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good, real good.
That's
I'm
good.
just so busy right now.
Yeah.
Working on all this stuff in the lab and whatnot.
Yeah. Actually, that's actually what I was kind of trying to talk to you about. That thesis that you've been working on, I've really wanted to work on it, and I know that you don't have a lot of time to kind of work on it, and I have some really good ideas I would like to kind of push forward.
The one about multiplying plant populations for the betterment. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Okay,
you had your announcement for it, and you were saying how you really wanted to work on it, and that's great, and I know it's your idea, but I really noticed that you're really busy with everything else, and I, don't really have a lot of time, or I actually do have a lot of time.
Well,
so.
I mean, that's on my list of things to do, and I respect that you want to come and help me, but I mean, I thought of this idea, and I just got to get the time to work on it, and I'd just politely decline your offer to do it.
Okay, all right. Well, I guess that's all right. Thanks, though. It was great to talk to you.
All right. A few days passed. Stuff happens, stuff doesn't happen. As in a grad school, you'll find days just sometimes seems like minutes and sometimes seems like years. But a few actual calendar days have passed.
Hey, Mitch.
Oh, hey, Josh, how's it going?
I'm all right. I got to be honest. I really just want to work on what you've been working on. I have great ideas. I know it's your idea, and I know that it's what you really want to work on, but I can really help you push forward in the right direction. And it's been a while since you announced this idea, and everyone's kind of like, oh well, we are just waiting for him to come through with this, and me included. I feel like it can really help you.
I feel like this. I mean, once again, I really, really appreciate what you're trying to do here. I really do. I mean, I'm finishing up one thing, and then I'm starting on another thing, and then eventually I will get to it. I promise. I mean, I hate to be really harsh and everything, but it's my idea, and it just came to me one day, just the way to do this and how it could benefit everything. It just came to me, and I really want to work on this because it's mine.
I understand that, but just keep in mind that I could kind of speed the process along. So I guess if you change your mind.
I really do appreciate it though, Josh. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's fast forward about a month.
Mitch, hey.
Hey.
Hey, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that project. I'm just gonna do it. I talked to my advisor, and I mean, I have all the data, and it's been quite a while since you came up with this idea, saying, I'm going to do it, But yeah, I'm going to do it. I know what I'm doing, and I'll still give you all the credit, but I'm doing this. I have to.
So let me get this straight. When you were listening to me talk about my idea, you decided to take that and use it as your idea.
Well, maybe if you'd work on it, like I wouldn't have to, because it'd be done. But you're not working on it. Yeah, you're getting to it, but I mean, there's people out there that would like the data to be shared, and I can provide that because I'm not doing a whole lot with my life right now.
Wait, so your advisor was okay with this?
Yeah. I mean, he said that as long as the time has passed, I can use whatever data I need.
Okay, so this time passed thing.
Since you've announced it, it's been almost 2 months. He said, I'm going to have this done. Didn't happen.
All right, I see how it is. You go for it. What?
I've been caught that, first of all, that Josh did say he would cite Mitch, even though he's doing against Mitch as well. Second thing, Josh's advisor is on board. And third thing, both of them are trying to get their damn degree. Okay? Let's not forget that's the villain. You want to get the hell out of here, okay? As much as it is great hanging out here, going around, watching Half-Masted perform every month at the Lab House, eventually you want to get out, okay? So if I can have them both back, they're going to stay in character. And before you discuss this, in case there's anything you need clarification or want some insight into how they're feeling, feel free to ask the characters any questions you have. Put on the mic so it can be recorded. So this is Josh, and this is Mitch. And any questions for them? Oh, come on, I'm standing here with the microphone. Be good. Okay, there you go. Yes, question.
So what's your next move, Mitch?
I guess I have to go talk to my advisor too to see what happens next. I mean, I'm obviously really upset about this, and this is he took my idea. Straight up took it. And so I think that I need to talk to an advisor to see what my next step is in order to go on with the process. I don't know what's going to happen.
George, what's your main reason for taking this idea?
Josh, what's your main reason for taking the idea?
Because I can push this forward, and because I don't like seeing a great idea go to waste. And that is exactly what Mitch is doing.
Hi, Josh. Can the advisor approve you to use somebody else's idea and work on it?
What's that?
Can the advisor approve you to use somebody else's idea and work on it?
I think the implication is that the actual data isn't owned by either of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask, how did you learn of the idea? How did you learn of the idea, Josh?
He announced it. He had a big kind of almost a ceremony kind of thing where he announced his idea. He announced what he was going to do with it. And we're also friends, so I mean, we talked about it. And that's kind of where my wheels started turning, and I kind of got the idea too.
So Josh, if you don't have a lot going on right now, why don't you just meet up with him on Saturdays or something and work on it with him besides taking it?
Because actually Mitch is so busy where I have tried to set up maybe a time in his schedule and my schedule that works well for both of us, but every time he doesn't really, it's not really his fault for blowing it off because he really does have a lot going on, and I do condone that, but if I guess I don't see the problem with taking his idea further if he's not going to take it further. Because, 10 years could go by and he still won't have it done. And then both of us are done.
What is the realistic time frame that Mitch might get this project addressed?
Within the next year. I mean, that's what I was kind of looking at. I mean, I announced the idea, and then within the next year, I was hoping to get it started and get collecting data on it.
Do you believe that, Josh?
No.
All right, so Mitch, would you recommend, like, if I'm interested in some idea, I make a big announcement so that I can keep other people from working on it?
What was that?
Like, if I were to come up with an idea, like, you know, something about plant populations, if I had an idea that I thought was interesting, would you recommend I come up with, like, a big announcement party for it, and then so that my peers can't come and develop it further?
I would recommend you call it a work in progress.
Anybody else? Oh.
Mitch, will you have an objection to Joshua actually starting it and then you come in?
I really would, because I was kind of the pioneer with this idea, and I feel like it's kind of a stabbing in the back kind of situation, because he was listening to me do this, and now he's just straight up taking it. I mean, he's going to not necessarily hold up his agreement and put my name on there, and even then, as we just saw, the intention-wise, I mean, you can't really prove intention. So,
how long have you guys known each other as friends? And Josh, have you seen Mitch finish anything that he's wanted to start and complete?
I'd say 5 years.
It's been about 5 years, yeah.
We've been friends about 5 years, and yeah, he has done some really good work, but I've noticed that when he does put off a project, that doesn't get finished. Like, he's best when he really motors through something, and then especially in this project, he's not doing so.
So you might notice, like, when AMA journal comes out, American Medical Association, I mean, that's when they announce their big idea. So because you announced it in public, do you not think that it would be advantageous for others to reference you, and that is your idea, so you do get some credit for it initially?
That thought had not crossed my mind. I mean, I was just really, really excited about this idea in general. And so I just kind of threw something together to tell some people about it, hopefully get wheels turning on it. But that had not crossed my mind at all.
Okay, so we're now going to have some group discussions. Who's going to introduce that? Okay.
Group and discuss the scenario, the issues that emerged in this scenario, and have some conversation around these questions. What we will do then in probably about 5 to 7 minutes is we'll come back as a large group. We'll do some sharing out among the tables in terms of what were some of your lines of reasoning and thinking related to these issues.
If there's something that comes up that's ambiguous, raise your hand, and Mitch or Josh can come and answer any questions from their character's point of view. So they're still on duty if you want to talk to them. Thanks.
They actually provided the facilitators with some commentary that we were.
Yes, patents are probably, not every research can have patent one of the outcomes, definitely. Every day. One of 10.
It depends on whom you are sharing with. If you can totally, completely trust that person, you can share.
Well, I couldn't recall any certain case.
If you think the person is not going to take an advantage of you, probably you can rely on that person.
Material science.
All right, let's go ahead and reconvene as a large group. I heard very interesting conversations as I made my way throughout the room. A lot of thoughtful conversations in terms of the variables and the elements that impact this particular scenario. Is there a table that would like to share out some of the reasoning that you were having some conversation around? And I'll come to you so that you have an opportunity to use the...
Hi, I came in kind of late, so I missed the little acting skit, but what we kind of arrived at is that the greater good should always outweigh the individual good. So if it's a process that's going to benefit society as a whole, then it should always be thought of in that method, that, you know, if it's some sort of, you know, conflict between two individuals, it should always be resolved in order to, you know, like I said, benefit society as a whole. And that we also decided that mediators or some sort of formal board to kind of mediate the problem would be beneficial, so that, you know, a impartial judge or an impartial group can kind of make decisions for the better of the individuals who are invested in it kind of emotionally. And then, oh, and delegating, where, you know, if the person who had, you said that, because I missed the skit, it was kind of one person had already developed kind of the method. Well, if that person wanted to delegate to the other person who wanted to work on the project, then that could be a way to resolve it, whereas one person's kind of slightly more in control, and so, you know, they wouldn't feel as bad about, you know, letting go, this is my idea, they are still in charge of it, kind of, so. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. So let me ask this question, because you mentioned the greater good. Did any tables have conversation about how to determine the greater good? Or, oh, okay, I see a hand back there. Go ahead, Donna.
Yes, we did. Whoa, sorry. How would you decide, what are the ethics implied and involved to decide the greater good? Example we talked about was working on the information behind the atom and the nucleus and coming up with the nuclear bomb or the atomic bomb, or either way. I mean, at that point, who knew how that technology was going to be used? How do we know how this plant genetics information will be used? Again, is it going to be good? The information is probably always good, but our human application of that knowledge once we have it becomes another ethical choice.
Thank you, Stacy. Let me come up front here. Sam?
A couple people in our group were like really set on the fact that it's his idea, and if somebody else were to like pursue it, that would be stealing. But Sarah questioned, like, because, well, they're like, you know, even though he hasn't gotten to it right now, like, he really seems like he's going to. And so then he should be the one to be able to do that. But then Sarah posed the question, what if it was, like, what if the topic was different? What if they were finding the cure for cancer? Then do you think the person who's going to pursue it right away should be the one to do it? And that kind of changed opinion. So it's going back to the greater good. If this is going to cure cancer, then you obviously want to go with the one who's going to get it done.
Thank you, Sam. And that brings up another related issue, and that's of time. What is a reasonable period of time that someone might start and carry out a project?
That's exactly what I'm just feeding off of her point here. I'm thinking both Josh and Mitch, if they're both grad students to start at the same time, I'm wondering if they'll both hand in their thesis at the same time. So wouldn't both of them finish the project at the same time anyway? If someone can maybe answer that question, or I don't know how to say that.
I'll pass off to Doug. Thanks.
Mitch is doing something else for his thesis, so it wouldn't be the same project. And Josh's issue is Mitch is not working on the project that Josh wishes Mitch was working on. And also, if two graduate students start at the same time, all bets are off as to when they finish.
Would Table 6 like to share? I think I see a hand.
We talked about how it might not really be it's Mitch's idea, but until Josh pursues it, that's his idea. Because even though Mitch brought it up, if Josh works on it, that's his idea. I don't think it's Mitch's idea until he puts the effort forth. And we talked about the Facebook example where Mark got the idea from 2 classmates that he was going to school with, but he has credit for Facebook because he made it, he established it, not the other 2 boys.
Hi. I had the same problem when I was studying master in finance in my country. I picked a topic in my field and worked on that as my thesis. But month later, another classmate chose the same idea to work on. But I at that time and now still I didn't think, and I don't think he was stealing my idea, because the idea is not something pertaining to me and once time in a life, and no one else can't work on it. We are all supposed to improve the knowledge and help the world, and each of us could see the same thing but differently from the very beginning step of the process. As long as he mentioned me and I mentioned him in our written work, I think it's enough. At that time, our advisor, our professor, invited both of us to his room and shared his idea with both of us. We both promised that do that analysis in different processes, not the same. And I think it was the professional way to handle that situation.
That was kind of brought up at our table too, that even if they have similar ideas, when they go through the whole process of, getting their methods and then the angle that they take and the results that they get, their papers could still end up being completely different. I mean, like, just to throw out an example, if you think about inclusion, like how many different angles and how many different papers there are on inclusion. So just because it's a similar or the same idea, the paper would end up completely different even if they both did a paper on it.
I think that's a great point, Sam, and that reminds me of that many of these issues that we're discussing, they are field dependent as well. So depending on the field that you're in, may lend itself to how you might proceed. I wanted to bring up one other point. Before we move on, let me, the point I wanted to bring up is Table 2 had some discussion about the nature of how Josh learned about the idea. Was it formal, was it informal, and how does that impact then whose idea it is and who might run with that idea, so to speak. But let me go back to...
Yeah, talking of just maybe giving a little answer to that, I think it was quite informal, and maybe he could have met, what's his name, Mitch on the road, and Mitch was just talking about it. But I think one of the things we said here was that our problem was who should be an author, and if you talk about substantial contributions, we'll give Mitch a yes, because, practically he came up with the theory. Maybe he did not explicitly say that is a theory, but he set an idea which maybe can be considered an assumption or a hypothesis or maybe a theory. But talking about that, a lot of times you get friends, especially when people around, in sociology there's something they call the way they're thinking of a society of a small group, people being together always think like same. So there's a possibility that same thing was felt by Josh because they are doing the same thing, they are friends and everything, and it's just like something which came to Josh too, like it came to Mitch. But since Mitch was the originator of it, I think he's potentially an author too, like if Josh has to write it. So.
Excellent, thank you. And I think that idea of friendship, or even if we extend it to the idea of just learning communities. I know Table 2 had some conversation about, well, if we fear that people will steal our ideas, then perhaps we'll be less likely to share. And if we're less likely to share, then how will new ideas continue to be generated and nurtured? And so certainly that factors into this conversation as well. Any other considerations? All right. Oh, okay.
We spoke a little bit about how knowledge is constructed through discussions and reflection. You synthesize knowledge by visiting with others, and at some point, someone claims it's their idea. And my question is, when can you claim ownership of an idea? And I'm not sure you're the authority to claim, hey, this is my idea. It sounds like something a 2 or 3-year-old could do. This is my idea. Who has the authority to say, yes, that idea is, say, copyrighted or whatever, to create ownership of it? That's a question.
It is a very good question. Would anyone like to respond? Or Tom or Sam, did your comments dovetail off of? No? Okay. How do we determine ownership? Unfortunately, I think my caveat here today that I forgot to tell you all is that I don't have any answers. But what is perhaps more important is that we are having this discussion and bringing awareness to these topics in a thoughtful way, so that we can proceed, with the information that we have at hand in the way that we feel is the best way to proceed at any given moment. What I would like to do now here is move into the second part of our afternoon and have some conversation around student-mentor relationships, and certainly that relates to this last scenario. But we'll take it a little bit further. We'll follow the same format again. So Dr. Harton will provide us with some information, some food for thought, and then we'll hear from the half-mastered group to set us up with a scenario to think about, and then we'll have some additional time for the small group and large group discussion.
Okay, thanks. Is this mic on? Okay. As I mentioned earlier, I've had a lot of experience with working with graduate students, and I've done a lot with working with them with issues with their advisors. And so some of the things today I'm going to be talking about kind of come from that experience. I also wanted to mention, though, that I have experience with this issue of student-mentor relationships as a graduate student myself. I worked with a brilliant, famous psychologist when I was in my PhD program, who was also kind of notoriously difficult to work with. So in the time that I was in grad school, in the 5 years that I was there were 12 students who started with them, and I was the only one that finished. And if you think about, he had a career that was almost 40 years long, and normally in our field, you would have 1 or 2 students graduating each year. In that 40 years, there were only, I think, 6 of us. So for someone as brilliant and prolific as him to not have very many students, there's something going on. But anyway, so I'll be talking a little bit kind of from that experience as well. And one of the things that I think kind of fuels me to help students with this issue is the lack of support that I feel like I got when I was in that situation. And, I'm glad that I worked with him. I think the benefits outweighed the costs. But there were things, so one time I was having an issue with my funding, and I was talking to the secretary to get her to talk to the department head. And she came back and told me that the department head's response was that she wouldn't meet with me about it, and that if you lay down with the dogs, you get fleas. So basically, they were just saying, because we don't like who you work with, we're not going to help you. And I don't think that that's typically the way UNI is, but I did want to let you know that I have some experience with this and some empathy for these kind of issues. Though I also have to admit that some of the things that made me mad when I was a graduate student, now that I'm a faculty member, I can understand a little better, now that I can see the other side of it. And so I'm going to be talking about some of these issues, and I'm mostly going to talk about what you can do, because you're the ones that are in front of me and you're the ones that have the power. Obviously, there could be a whole different talk on what mentors should be doing, and there are a lot of things that they should be doing, and they probably a lot of times do need some training. But I'm going to talk about what you can do to have a good experience with your mentor. So what is one and why do I need one? your mentor could be your academic advisor, it could be your thesis supervisor, your graduate coordinator, someone else, but it's someone who you look to for career guidance. It doesn't have to be just one person. It doesn't have to be a formal relationship. It doesn't have to be someone that's assigned to you. It can be someone that you find that you're comfortable getting career information from and getting advice and information from. And a lot of times we talk about mentors and thesis supervisors or research project supervisors as being the same person. And in this talk, a little bit I'll be talking about them as if they are, but keep in mind that there are other people who might be mentors for you, and maybe in different ways. You might have one person you look to for research answers, another person you look to in terms of sort of balance in your life and how to handle academic demands with family or other things. And why does this matter? Why do you need one? Well, research shows that people who are mentored are generally more successful. They generally have an easier time of things. They're generally more ready to go when they get into a position after they graduate. So it's not something that you have to have, but it's someone that can be helpful to you. And particularly if you are in a program where you're doing a research project or a thesis, even if you don't consider them really your mentor, there is someone you'll be working closely with, and a lot of these things will apply to them. And again, like I mentioned, remember that it doesn't have to be one person. You can get things from different people. So what should a mentor do? A good mentor, one, should spend time with you. If you've got a mentor who never is able to meet with you, that's not a good mentor. They should actually be available to meet with you, whether it's once a week or once every 2 weeks or whatever makes sense in terms of your project and your field, but it should be someone who has some time for you, who provides you with feedback. One of the important parts of being a mentor is giving feedback, whether it's on people's written projects, whether it's on their ideas. Should be giving you some information in terms of how you can improve. They should also teach you. They should provide you with information, resources. They should show you how to approach a problem, give you ideas in those sorts of ways. And then one that I think people don't think about as often is that you also want to find someone who will support you and who is willing and able to go to bat for you. So if you run into a situation, as I did in graduate school, where other people aren't supporting you, is your advisor powerful enough and willing enough to go and say, this is wrong, this student's being treated unfairly, we need to fix this. So, it doesn't have to be someone, who's a full professor or whatever, but it needs to be someone who's willing to speak out for you. We don't like to say this, but let's all be realistic. As a graduate student, it's kind of a lower power situation, right? You can't always do what it is that you want to do. Sometimes there are forces acting on you that you can't control. Your mentor should be someone who can protect you from that to an extent. They should be able to go to bat and to try to make things better for you. They should also be able to help you find useful experiences or colleagues. So they should be someone who can introduce you to people at conferences or suggest internships that you should go to. Someone who will have some ideas that will help you as you prepare for your career. So in thinking about how you should choose a mentor, and actually, let me go back for a second. I want to mention here too that a good mentor doesn't have to do all of these things. And so that's one of the reasons why you can have multiple people be your mentor. Like I mentioned with my advisor, there were some things that he wasn't that good at, but he is brilliant and he has a lot of connections, and I met a lot of people through him, and I'm much better known in the field than I would be otherwise, probably because of that. So it may be that some of these things are things that one person can fulfill, some things are someone else can fulfill for you. So some things to think about in choosing a mentor. First, you want to think about your own goals and take a minute and think, what do I want? What do I want to get out of graduate school? What do I need from a mentor? And some of the things you might think about are research or scholarly interests, and that's the one that people most often think of. And that's important, but that's not everything. You do want someone who is doing research, if you're going to work on their projects, that you're interested in. You don't want to spend 2 years or 6 years in a PhD program bored with what you're doing. But you also want to think about things like your own knowledge and skills. What things do you need? What things do you still need to learn? And who's someone who could teach you that? So if you see a problem in yourself as being statistics, maybe you want to find a mentor who has some statistical background. Also think about your timetable. You know, if you are here on a visa and you have to get done in 2 years, you want to find an advisor who is going to be able to help you get done in 2 years. So thinking about your own timetable in terms of how much flexibility you have there and what type of support you need. Some people like more of a style or either like or need more support. Some people want an advisor who is interested in their home life, who is interested in them as a person, who you know, gives them a lot of support, a lot of hand-holding. Other people want someone who just gives them feedback and don't want to have that much of a relationship with them. So you want to think about what works for you. Do you work better with a lot of direction or just a little bit of direction, and how is that going to fit with who you potentially might work with? You also want to talk to or think about things in terms of the mentor. So is this person someone who's generally available? If it's someone who just got a dean position and they're going to be doing that a lot, that might not be the best person. They might not have a lot of time for you. Think about their reputation. Do they, you know, again, in my example, I quickly learned his reputation. Think about that. Is that going to be a problem for you? Their track record. Have they gotten other students out? What have these students done? Have they done things similar to what you want to do? Have they been successful? And then think about their personality as well. So one of the ways that you can find out some of these things, because you can't really, you know, go up to an advisor and say, so, you know, how are your students doing? And how many of you gotten out? You know, I mean, that might come across a little negatively, right? One of the best things you can do is talk to advanced students in your program about potential mentors. So if you're thinking about working with someone, you know, what advice can they give you? And as graduate coordinator, there are a lot of things that I know, but it's a little politically dicier for me to say these things than it is for the other graduate students in the program. But there are faculty that I know of who work better with men than women or women than men. There are faculty members who work really well with people who are independent but not so well with people who aren't. There are faculty who work well with people who have their own idea, or there are others who only want you to work within their idea or their particular area of research. So find out what this person's like, and keep in mind that fit is the most important thing. You want someone who's doing research that you're interested in, but more than that, you want someone that's a good fit for you in terms of their work style, in terms of their personality, and all of those sorts of issues. So especially when you go to a PhD program, they tend to pre-assign you to faculty members. So depending on your field, you might apply to work with a particular person instead of in a particular program. And in that case, sometimes it's harder to find out about the person, but there's still things you can do. You can still ask if you could talk to grad students in the program. You could still, you know, at conferences, try to talk to some of the grad students in that program if you're thinking about going onto a PhD program. So try to find out something about what they're like. But be careful about how you do it. You know, again, you don't want to walk up to grad student X and say, hey, I've heard that Professor Y is really a jerk. Is that true? Because Y is going to hear this, and they might not like you so much after that. So you have to be subtle in how you do it, but you can talk to people about, you know, what are the good things about working with this person? How do you fit in the lab? What do you like about being there? Okay, so you can get an idea of whether the person is going to be a good fit for you, whether their style is going to work with your style. Okay, I'm going to go through a few things in terms of how you can be a good mentee. And again, there are things that I could tell mentors as well, and I'm doing this because you're here. And so I'm going to give you some ideas for what you can do to make the relationship a better one. So once you've found someone that you're interested in working with, one important thing is to make sure you communicate clearly about expectations. And I think that'll be one of the issues that'll come up in the role play that you're doing in a little bit. You know, what do you expect from a mentor? What do you want from them? And what do they want from you? And this is where you can find out, you know, is this someone who just wants you to do a project and just report in every month or two? And if you're someone who wants to have more of a continual relationship, that's not going to work for you. So find out what it is that they expect, what it is that, and think about what you expect and see how that's going to match up. Be respectful of their time. As a graduate student, your life for some periods of time might revolve around your thesis or your idea or your paper, okay? And that's like the absorbing thing to you. But to a faculty member, they might have several students, they have several other classes, they have several other things going on. And so it's easy for you to think, oh, they're not paying enough attention to my paper, this needs to get out. But you have to keep in mind that they have a lot of other things going on too. And so you want to be respectful of their time. Don't hand them things and expect it to get back to you the next day. Sometimes that might work, but in most cases you want to give people a period of time. And again, that's an expectation that you can communicate. One of our faculty in our department actually has a signed contract that he has graduate students sign that talks about, you know, when you get me things, I will get it back to you within 2 weeks, and, you know, kind of clearly lays out what the expectations are and what they are able to do. You also want to be respectful of their feedback. I also, in addition to getting complaints from graduate students as graduate coordinator, I get complaints from faculty about graduate students. And one of the biggest complaints I get about graduate students is that they didn't pay attention to my feedback. So when they take your paper and they write on it, they expect you to read and pay attention to what they wrote. And maybe you did, and you just decided it wasn't a good idea for some reason, but you need to clearly communicate that. When they hand you papers back, respond to the comments in some way. Might not be the way they exactly say it, but you know, one of the things that I found informative, which is kind of obvious, but when you think about it, if someone reads your paper and they say that something is unclear, by definition, it's unclear. They didn't get it, okay? So think about, how can I say this differently? You don't have to say it the way they said it necessarily, but what's a better way to say it? Or if they bring up points and, you know, from your reading of the literature, it's just not relevant, write a note in there or to explain to them why you didn't make that change. And that'll work a lot better than just not doing it, and then they think you're ignoring them, and then they get mad and it all escalates. So be clear about when you're not taking feedback, why that is. Trust that they know more than you, at least about some things. One of the other big issues that comes up a lot is students who are unhappy because for those who have thesis projects, their thesis advisor says they're not ready to go to the committee and they think they're ready. And I've seen a lot of instances where this has happened and then the faculty member will say, okay, go. Invariably when that's happened in my 13 years here, the student has wished afterwards that they hadn't pushed. You know, trust them that you've chosen this person as a mentor for a reason, right? You like and respect this person. If they're telling you that you're not ready or that something needs more work or something else needs to be looked at, trust them that they might know what they're talking about. So keep that in mind. This one I always tell my grad students, know what their pet peeves are. So for me, the thing that I can't stand is whining. And so I tell my students that. It's like, you know, whatever you do, just don't whine. There are other people in my department who can't stand it when a student doesn't respond to an email immediately. And I try to warn those students, you need to respond to their emails immediately. So get to know the person and know what the things are that they are particularly bothered by so that you can modify those things. Right? That's an easy, you know, in relationships in general, you do that with your significant other. You know the things that bug them, and so unless you want to bug them, you try not to do those. Right? Another piece of advice, and this is one that I got from my advisor, is to think about solutions, not just problems. And I think this is good advice for everything in life. And that was one of the things he told me was, you know, you're good at coming up with problems, but what would really be impressive is if you come up with solutions. So when you're reading research, don't just come up with what are all the things they did bad, how could you fix those things? In terms of working with your advisor, you know, don't just say, there's no way I can get you that paper by Monday. That's a problem. Say, I've got some things going on, I can't get it to you Monday, but what if I get it to you Wednesday with this other section as well? Okay? So when you're working with faculty members, whether it's for class or your thesis or an assistantship or whatever, instead of just saying this is not possible, say what is possible. Be more positive in how you present things. That, you know, I can't do it by this date, but what if I do this instead? Or, you know, maybe if I don't give you this other thing, then I can get you this on Monday. So think about those sorts of issues. Okay, some other things, admit when you mess up. So invariably in grad school, something is going to go wrong. Some examples I can think of, one person was doing a survey study and forgot to change the codes so that every item, no matter how you answered it, was coded 1. So, you know, all the data looked exactly alike. She couldn't get anything from it. Other people, you know, you forget to show up for a session, or you brought the wrong materials, or you find that you cited something wrong, or that you analyze the data wrong and the conclusions are actually opposite of what you thought, admit those things. Everybody does stuff like that. I still do stupid things, but the important thing is to admit it. Be upfront about it, like we were talking about with the written word. Don't just try to hide what you did. Be honest in what you've done. Own up to it, and that's going to get you a lot more respect than trying to hide it and then it coming out in some other way. And if you're honest about it, there might be ways that it can be fixed, and at least you're being honest about what's happened. Okay. Don't assume that faculty members can read your mind. Don't assume that they know when you've decided that you no longer want to go to a PhD program, now you want to get a job. They're not going to know that unless you communicate it. Don't assume that they're going to know that your boyfriend or girlfriend just broke up with you and you're too upset to do any work and that's why you're not doing anything. Be upfront and honest about these things. You don't have to go into details, like when a student comes in and tells me that they're going through some personal issue. I don't sit there, I am a psychologist, but I'm not going to sit there and ask them all these questions about their problems and their life and all this. If they want to tell me, it's fine, but do make sure they know that you've got something going on. And be honest. If there's something that's happened in your life, these things happen, that is distracting you, tell your professors so they know, and this is something they can deal with. They can understand then. Because again, I've had cases where people get really upset with students because they're not responding to things when, the student's parent just died and they don't know it. And if they knew that, they would have been a lot more sympathetic to the situation. So make sure they know what's going on. Be nice, be likable. Faculty like people who are all of us, we like to work with people who are nicer, and so being nice is a good thing for the mentor as well as the mentee. Be someone that they want to spend time with and want to interact with. Don't complain all the time, or in my case, don't whine. Be independent, but not too independent. So you don't want to always wait for them to take a step in your project, but you don't want to go out and do the whole paper without consulting them probably. So you want to kind of find that balance of, how much should you talk to the advisor about stuff, how much independence should you show without being too independent, without going too far and then perhaps making a mistake and having to go back and correct that later. If you're talking about a thesis or a research paper, plan on revisions. And I think this is something that grad students are sometimes not ready for, because as an undergraduate, usually you write a paper and you turn it in and you're done with it and you never look or think about that paper again. As a graduate student, they keep coming back over and over again. And you have your defense and then you think you're finally done and then you've still got stuff to do with it. Okay? So just keep in mind for longer term papers, whether it's things you're writing up for publication or a thesis or maybe a research paper for your degree, that there are going to be revisions. And feedback is what you want. If you have an advisor who hands it back and just says, oh, this is fine, that person's not doing their job because they're not giving you feedback. Maybe you're perfect, but probably not. So, you want someone who will actually give you feedback. Plan on that, take that into account, plan accordingly so if you want to get finished in March, think about, well, it's probably going to take me 2 months of revision, so I really want to have my first draft by January. And you can work out those deadlines with your mentor and try and figure out what's going to work for you. But do plan that there's going to be revisions and don't get upset by those. And then again, realize that faculty are human and have outside lives too. And so maybe their parent might pass away during the semester. Or they might have some life event happen that takes them away for a while. And you want to keep those things in mind. I had a couple summers ago, I had 3 students who were all defending their thesis in the summer. But in that same summer, I took a group of students on a study abroad class, and then I ran a minority research program here at UNI. So I had an incredibly busy summer. And so it was hard for me to give all 3 of them the amount of attention that they needed during that time period. And so you have to think about, what are their outside things that they're working on and how can we work together on that. And actually what we ended up doing there was the students themselves worked it out that they were all trying to graduate by summer graduation, and it became clear that it wasn't going to be possible, and I couldn't get an extension. So one of the students needed to graduate for a job. The other one was going on to a PhD program, and so it didn't make any difference for her if she graduated in the summer or the fall. And so she just voluntarily agreed and said, okay, spend your time with this person, and then, I'll finish up after that. And so, it's nice to think about beyond just your individual relationship with your mentor, other people that might be working with them and how you can work things out sometimes. Okay, what you should do if it's not working. So you're working with someone, and again, this applies to mentors, to thesis supervisors, to people that you might be working with in assistantships and so on as well. First thing you want to do is be open and communicate with the person themselves. If you're having problems with someone, I mean, this is basic relationship research, talk to the person first about how you can deal with that, and talk to it again, thinking about solutions, not problems. What are some ways that maybe this could work? Be careful with email. I mentioned before that email is a good way to document things, kind of a good informal way to document things. But I've also seen cases in my department where students email faculty and then it just becomes this big escalation. Because emails are difficult to read sometimes, to read emotions into. And so people will write an email and they'll say, I cannot get that to you by Friday. And then the person makes all these assumptions about what the person really means, and they email back, and there are caps in the emails, and it just gets worse and worse. And then they're all down in my office complaining, and I have to calm them all down. So avoid that. Email can be useful in terms of documenting things, but you want to make sure that the emails are clear and are calm. Don't escalate. And then, kind of related to the email as well as other things, check with other people to make sure you're seeing things accurately. I had a situation a few years ago with a student who is one of the best students I've ever had, and he went on to a PhD program to work with a friend of mine that several people had worked with successfully. He was not a good fit for this person because their styles were different, and so he wasn't happy in that relationship, and he somehow sort of threw this back onto me. And so we were still working on some papers together, and I got a nasty email from him about how I was trying to ruin his career and steal his ideas, and I wrote him back, and it's like, first of all, I'm not trying to do all that, but secondly, I don't have the time if I did want to do that. I don't have time to sit around and think about how to bring about other people's downfalls. So, and after he sent the email, he realized what he had done, how he had taken this other relationship and kind of thrown it or interpreted it onto me, and was sorry that he sent it, and all his friends and people that knew me were just like, what are you doing? But it could have been avoided had he written the email and then had someone read it before he sent it to say, is this really what's going on? And they might be, yeah, maybe it's not like that. Or there might be cases where you think something is unreasonable, and other people might say, yeah, maybe that's not so unreasonable. So you want to be aware of those sorts of things. If it's still bad, there are issues where students are exploited or harassed, and hopefully, these aren't common things. Again, I can think of the 200 or so students I've worked with, one case of harassment. But they do happen, and if they happen, you want to talk to somebody you trust about it. And I've got on there, if that person doesn't listen, find someone else. We actually, this is the same student who had the problem with her thesis advisor over the ownership of the data. Before he refused to let her use the data, he had apparently asked her out a couple times, and she had said no. And she went, according to her, and reported this to both the department head and the dean. And because all three of these people are gone now, because this faculty member was a very well-known, very valued faculty member, I'm assuming, they kind of said, well, do you really want to pursue this? Is this something you want to do? Maybe you just want to graduate and go on. And she didn't really feel supported in that. And so she waited a year or two, actually, and then came back, and I was graduate coordinator then, and talked to me about it. And as I said, we got the situation solved. But, you can't always assume that the first person you talk to is going to have the right response. The department head was a good friend of the faculty member in question, and though he should have acted on it, he didn't. And so in those cases, you need to find someone else. If you're in a situation that's bad, you need to find someone who's going to help you, and there should be someone there. The first person you talk to doesn't, keep asking them. Do keep in mind, however, if it's an issue of sexual harassment, that the faculty members may be obligated to report it. Which it should be reported, but if it's a situation that you don't want reported for some reason, you might want to be careful about how you talk about it. So for example, if a student came to me and said that a faculty member was asking them out, but I don't want you to tell anybody, or I don't want you to report it, I have to report it because that's part of my keep in mind that that may be the case, but that's generally because it should be reported. It is something that something should be done about. Okay, so remember, you don't have to have a mentor. You're not going to shrivel up and die and not graduate if you don't have one, but they can be useful. Your ideal mentor might actually be somebody outside your department or a peer. It doesn't have to be the person that you're working on your thesis with or the first person that's your advisor. And don't get discouraged. There are people who would love to help you succeed and who are a good fit for you. If the first person that you talk to doesn't seem to be a good fit, try other people to see who might be. Okay, thank you.
Nope, you're good.
My main mentor at the University of Michigan was not my advisor. It was a woman named Pat Shore, and she gave me the key piece of advice or wisdom that allowed me to finish my PhD. I dedicated my first book to her because if it weren't for her, I wouldn't have my PhD. I was feeling like I was not going to finish, and because I didn't feel like I was bright enough, because I was intimidated by all the other graduate students. And people kept giving me these pep talks. Oh no, Doug, you're really smart. You're the smartest person I know, which was crap because I didn't feel smart, so it just didn't work for me. And so I went to her and I said, well, I'm going to be dropping out of grad school. And she said, why? And I said, well, because I don't really feel like I'm smart enough to get this degree. And she said, oh, Jesus, Doug, stupider people than you have finished. That's what I needed to hear. So are the chairs in the right place?
They will be in a second.
Okay. So this is, well, that character name. So.
Stuart, come in.
Thank you, Professor Professorson. Beautiful day we're having, isn't it?
Yeah, it's fine. Do you have the results?
Yeah, but first I was wondering, how's your baby? Is it making funny faces and stuff? My brother at that age made all these funny faces. It was adorable.
It cries a lot.
Oh, is something wrong?
Yeah, it's got colic, but look, this doesn't matter. Do you have the research?
Well, is it going to be okay?
He'll be fine. Do you have the research?
Well, yeah, I've been running into some issues. I mean, I'd like to thank you, by the way. You helped me with my roommate problem last time we met. I really appreciate that. It's been great. We've been getting along a lot better now.
That's great.
Well, but actually there's one more problem. He's been bringing a lot of girls back to our room this time, and I just can't get the work done all the time, and it really bothers me.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to hear that. But the experiment, how did the experiment turn out?
Well, I'll get to that. I was just, could you maybe, help me out with this a little bit? I mean, it's affecting my work a little bit. They're kind of intertwined, so.
This isn't relevant. Can we stay on focus here? We got to get this done. I got other stuff to do today. Were the conclusions relevant? Were they irrelevant? How did things turn out?
Well, I'm getting there. I have the basic idea of what I want to get out of this. I was with my ultimate Frisbee team the other week, and we were partying a little bit and got out of hand. I meant to work on it the next morning, but you know how that goes. You were young once, I'm sure.
I need you to focus. You made the choice to do this, and at this point, you're choosing to do everything but this. All right, you've made a commitment to this. Just focus for a little bit. Can you at least present anything today?
I have some notes. Oh, so how's your wife doing? She good?
She's fine. Have you taken any steps towards the research? We need this done.
Well, yeah, I mean, as you can see, I have, like some sources laid out. I know what I want to do, but...
What you want isn't going to benefit the department, it's not going to benefit me, and it's not going to benefit you. You need to do something productive towards this.
And I feel I have been productive, but come on, let's be honest. It can't be all work all the time. We got to have some fun,
You're right. But when we schedule these meetings, They're plenty far in advance. You've had 2 weeks since the last meeting to get something done. From this, in 2 weeks, you've managed to take notes on books you're going to read.
Well, I just like to be well prepared. I don't want to jump in, and I thought you could help me. And have you read any of these books? Do you have anything to say about them?
Children Think is the one you're going to get the most out of.
Okay.
Spend a lot of time going over that, going over it again and again and again. The other books are fine. They're going to give you what you need, but you need to get it ready. Get me some data. Next time we schedule a meeting, show up and do something. Have something ready.
Okay,
Please.
I will do my very best.
All right, I need more than your best at this point.
I can't say anything beyond I'll do beyond my best.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all I want. Please. Your personal problems are fine. Like, deal with your personal stuff, but keep it out of the office. Can we just stick to research next meeting?
I'll try my hardest.
Thank you. Go do something.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's Stuart and Professor, and they will entertain your questions at this time.
I wanted to ask the student, what were your expectations? Is this your advisor?
Yeah, it's my advisor.
Okay, so when you were shopping for an advisor, or assuming you got to shop, what were your expectations?
Well, I wanted someone who would definitely, work me and help me get the results I want, but be a little personable too. I mean, I have stuff going on. I sometimes want to unwind and chat before I get to the work, so that's kind of what I was looking for, someone I could talk with as well as get something out of.
So is this a typical meeting for you guys? Is this how they always go?
Yes.
How did you normally the advisor has to say yes? What made you to accept the guy as your?
I had a couple faculty members tell me he was brilliant, and this is a huge project. It's going to get the department a lot of renown, and I was told this guy was great. He knew his stuff, and that he would speak well on our behalf. He is a good representation of what we stand for, and they were wrong.
Did you have any conversations about how your relationship would work?
Just kind of organically. I mean, he helped me talk me a couple problems the first time, so I kind of assumed that that's how it would go from now on. So I guess maybe I shouldn't have assumed, but that's just what I thought.
I realized that he knew certain things about your family. The question is, why did you, if you knew, maybe if you don't really like people getting into a lot of personal stuff when you are trying to talk about office things, why did you let him get into your personal life? He knows your wife, he knows your kid. You even helped him with his roommate's problem. So I think you actually let him to, into personal stuff a lot. So why did he do that?
Admittedly, I maybe did too much, but at the time I had cancel a couple meetings that we were going to have, and I felt bad just saying, hey, I can't meet with you. So, I tried to explain, I got to take the kid to the hospital, I'm sorry. Or my wife is freaking out right now. So I got to explain to, I at least wanted to justify why we were canceling before I rescheduled. I didn't want to leave him high and dry. So I tried to be as discreet as possible, but you can read into a lot when you tell somebody that you're taking your baby to the hospital. Questions came up.
So assuming that the student's behavior at the next
meeting and subsequent meetings doesn't change, what's your next move, Professor?
He's going to deal with the ultimatum that he's expendable. He can be replaced. There's other people that would love to be in the position he's in. And this needs to be done. This needs to be done soon. And if he's going to keep procrastinating, he can be replaced.
How long has it been since you guys started the conversation about this project?
A month or so, a month and a half.
2 months.
2 months. Same
2
thing.
months.
It's all over.
I got it.
Oh, thank you. I'll go back to Donna.
Professor, why are you so angry? I mean, I understand he's not prepared, but I mean, literally from when he knocked on the door, you were angry.
Are you married or do you have a baby?
No.
That and doing research will drain your soul very fast, specifically when you have to deal with all three at the same time. I'm tired.
Have you thought about, Professor, just kind of dropping the relationship and letting him figure things out on his own and get somebody else to do the experiment? Maybe he'll go away?
That's putting a lot of faith in him and a little bit more than I'd like to. At this point, there's a lot invested in what we're doing. There's too much to have a dynamic change of losing personnel. This would be a lot easier to resolve if he would just get it into gear.
Professor, have you thought about enlisting the help of a peer advisor or someone else in the program that Stuart might relate to? And then secondary, Stuart, would you be receptive to that and maybe getting some direction or help from someone else that's more of a peer?
He's getting me to the point where pushing him off onto someone else is looking very realistic.
Okay, Stuart, how did you feel about the meeting that you just had?
Well, I guess I admittedly wasn't as prepared as I should have been, but I thought he was a little harsh. You know, I'm just trying to keep things light. I guess maybe next time I'll try to keep it down a little bit and come a little more prepared. But it was a little harsh, I thought. But what can I do? Aside from do better, I guess. So.
Okay, let me take one more question and then we'll break into our small groups.
Did you guys lay out the specific expectations of each other and deadlines and what needs to be done by when?
We had a timeline set up for when things were supposed to be collected, what things were supposed to be turned in. Admittedly, I will say that I did not expect us to stick to that to a T. There was going to be variance, things were going to get pushed back, but I never thought that it would be this delayed.
And I'm kind of under the impression, as long as you get it done by the end date, what's really the problem? So we had a little misfire there, I guess.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, and as we did earlier this evening, if you would turn toward your peers and colleagues and have some discussion around this mentor-mentee relationship in terms of what perhaps are the challenges given this scenario.
But professor, advisor guy who's not going to put up with that, he needs to meet these milestones and see some progress. So there's not trust there that work gets done. We both had different expectations. Like Stuart kind of wanted to be more personal, and maybe that's more what he needed. He needs the other, and
that professor, you know,
the fact
the student shouldn't respond in that way. So if I'm that professor, I will
wasn't working.
like investigate a little bit to like find out what's happening. Because it was like it won't come from nowhere, and this guy did nothing. I mean, during the last 2 months. Yeah.
Go ahead. It's almost like if you would have given an inch and he would have listened a little bit, then it would have got out of hand and nothing would have got done. But you can kind of see
I'm from the South, and so like any interaction that people have, usually there's a good 3 to 4 minutes of just, fluff in the beginning. You can't walk through the halls without stopping and saying, hi, how you doing? Yeah, Reed. And then you get down to work later. So, I don't know.
Well, the professor could have given him some other resources and said, oh, I understand that problem. Another student of mine had the same issue, and I directed them toward such and such services and student affairs. Maybe you could talk to them. So sort of acknowledging it, but then giving him some other resource so he didn't have to spend time chatting about it.
All right, if you would take maybe the next 30 seconds to wrap up your conversation, then we will go ahead and share out as the large group. Oh, it became silent. That means all of you are ready. I heard lots of conversations as I walked around. What I did note, many of you expressed the idea that you are all in your first year, first semester, and so many of you have not really thought a great deal about the mentor relationship. And I just wanted to let you know that one of the reasons we chose that topic was because we knew that many of you are in that first semester, and so it seemed timely to us to help you think about how you might pursue a mentor relationship. What are some things you might think about here in the coming semesters? Were there other ideas, comments with regard to this scenario? All right.
It kind of seems like the steward was trying to get rid of the situation. It seems like he was kind of unprepared, so he was talking more about the personal life rather than talking about the professional life and the academics, because this is the 4th time they had the meeting, and it is kind of continuum ever since then what followed from the first situation. So what I feel was that he was kind of unprepared what was going to happen, so that's the reason he was not really highlighting the main important topics that he should be prepared on.
So this idea that you were very unprepared, would you agree? Well, and I was also, as I was watching this scenario, I was wondering if, while you certainly were unprepared, if you also had an intent of perhaps building a relationship, and so you desired to make some connections there, perhaps.
I think in this scenario, the student is a little bit irresponsible from my personal perspective, but the professor is also, not provide some like a plan for that student. It was like if I'm that professor and a student, and it was like graduate students was not like 3 years old kids, and they know the professor's expectation, and he still come out, contrast the professor's expectation. If I'm that professor, I will investigate a little bit. So, in order to know what's happening to these students, and in this circumstance, it looks like a dilemma. But for me, it's kind of like I have a solution. It was like the students can make a little bit progress in this condition, even a little bit. That will help. And for the professor, it looks like it's hard for that student to do such a huge project. He should make a clear plan and divided it into small parts and make the students do it step by step, so that I think that will finally solve the problem.
Excellent, and you were not alone. Many tables talked about a need for clear or more clear expectations, that there seemed to be a mismatch in terms of what was expected.
Looked like in this situation we could use some of the mentoring guidelines that were presented earlier. you know, things do come up, and if it's serious, like in the professor's case, a phone call, email, you know, to reschedule would be good. I don't recall on the student's part how serious some of those things might have been coming up. I remember something about Frisbee, and maybe that wouldn't be a good excuse, but at least to call your professor or email your professor and say, I'm unprepared, and I don't think that you can do that, get away with that very long, but seems like some kind of a mentoring relationship needs to be worked on in this relationship.
Yeah, our table came up with that as well. It's, I think, an important point to emphasize that, you know, these things do happen that where, for whatever reason, you know, you weren't able to get to the point where you wanted to for the meeting. So like a quick email for 5 minutes the night before, hey, I wasn't able to get this, can we reschedule, or is there something else we can talk about? Another thing that came up in our table is that it's quite possible that some of the students are say, international students, where English isn't their first language. And so this might not be specific to the situation that was presented, but there may be some, you know, tacit assumptions from both sides as to the expectations. So I think it's clear to kind of, right at the start, kind of lay down the expectations, the understandings, and for each party to bear in mind what it means to have, say, a person where English is a second language. So the professor, you know, might want to be more thoughtful in, say, using idioms or something of that nature, and making sure that they're clear in expressing what they expect for their student. And similarly, the student should, if they're having trouble understanding something, speak to the professor or speak with their peers to try and fix the problem.
Thank you. I appreciate that point, because I think there are often cultural differences that might impact how we interact with our students and vice versa. And so it's important to keep that in mind. Sam, did I see your hand?
A question that came up for our group, like they said that Stuart was really bright. He had other faculty members that said that. And so our question was, does Stuart have the tools? Like, does he know how to go about doing this project and getting the information he needs? Like, maybe he's fully capable of doing it, but he needs some assistance from the professor. So, like, do you know how to go about doing this research project, Stuart? And has the professor ever offered to assist you in step-by-step?
I guess I've done other research projects before, maybe not of this, in my undergrad maybe, so not this level. I guess maybe on the part of myself, I kind of assumed I knew how to do it, and I didn't ask him for like strict guidelines on how he wanted it, I just kind of assumed, so.
I can't offer help unless it's asked. I can only assume, as he's probably done research stuff before, that he knows exactly how to research, and if he needs help, he can ask, but unless I hear it, I can only assume he can be responsible.
And one of my fears was, I wasn't sure if Stuart understood how serious this situation was, and so I was also looking for the professor to perhaps take a moment to explain the seriousness of this, because I feared that perhaps the meeting would end and there would be a misinterpretation, and that perhaps Stuart did not realize the seriousness, and on the professor's part, he might have felt that he had conveyed that perhaps through his body language or his tone, but not perhaps in words. Any other comments? All right, I know we are at the very end of our day. Let me attempt to sum up what I think emerged from our conversations this afternoon. First, I think we all need to acknowledge and grow comfortable with the idea that there are no clear-cut answers in terms of these ethical issues. That the best we can do is to take in as much information as we might and to have conversations around these issues in order that we make reasonable decisions. I also jotted down assume nothing. Because I think so often we carry with us assumptions that then inform our actions, but not everyone has the same assumptions that we operate from. And that brings me to the third point, and that is to communicate. That we must communicate with one another, whether it be our peers, our mentors, other faculty around us, and to be honest and genuine, authentic in those communications in order that we might avoid some misunderstandings or miscommunications. And the last point I think we can take from this afternoon is the need to set clear expectations, whether it be in terms of who is author, who owns the data, how do we communicate with one another, and to be willing to review those expectations often, to recognize that our world is ever-changing and dynamic, and so while it is certainly helpful to have expectations, it can be just as helpful to be in a continual process of reviewing those expectations as things arise. You all should have an evaluation form that you picked up when you came in today. We would appreciate if you would evaluate our efforts and this event this afternoon. We are especially thankful for your attendance. We are hoping to do an event similar to this in the spring that would address some additional issues relating to graduate education and ethics. So please look for that information. Anita, would you like to add any other comments? And we are so appreciative to our half-mastered group and to Dr. Shaw and Dr. Harton for really bringing these issues to life.